Tēnā tātou katoa, ngā mātā waka kua whakarau i ka mai ki tēnei wāhi I raro I te tuanui o tēnei whare, tēnā koutou. E tautoko ana ngā whakaaro ki te Aotearoa whānui, Ngāti Toi Pupuru te mana I te whenua, mā tātou katoa kia hui hui mai pēnei mō te kaupapa nei, tēnā koutou katoa. Thank you for the opportunity to be here. I am at risk of putting aside my notes and speaking to the many issues that were raised in the time that I've been here. But I want to firstly thank the organisers, Scott, Ruth, Jessica, and all the participants who have offered so much rich insight, research, learned experience, but also challenged the components of this particular conference, Shift Aotearoa. I also want to acknowledge all the nominees and successful recipients that were recognised last night in the Housing Awards event. In particular, the aspiration of setting excellence in the housing space, I think, is always something positive to foster amongst us, and I certainly want to, for the investment that Puni Kokiri have made in a couple of the successful awardees, recognise Matua Hemana, the work done at Kokohino in responding to a need within the community and taking a community-based approach with the Emergency Transitional Housing Project, tēnā koe, tēnā koutou, and also to the team for the sorted kāinga order financial capability program, which we have continued to see improving the information and education of our whānau who are embarking on their huarahi of housing aspiration, whatever that looks like. As I was listening to the kōrero, and fearful that I might divert from the substance of my own speech, but as I was listening to the kōrero, I think everybody comes with a question in mind in terms of the nature of the challenge that's in front of them. But when we came into government, we had to ask ourselves, what essentially is the problem we're trying to fix? And the system was broken, quite simply. And it wasn't simply about just Kiwi Build, although Kiwi Build became quite a stellar focal point of our policy because it was key, certainly to the Labour Party's election platform. But the extent of how broken the system was when we came into office became so evident, from the issues of homelessness, from the lack of provision of transitional housing into more secure accommodation, supported accommodation, and what that required, especially in the mental health services, building up the public stock of housing. And then we had the challenge and opportunity of trying to build that aspiration into a home ownership dream. But the system was essentially broken. As you know, I came into this role as Associate Māori Housing Spokesperson at the National Māori Housing Summit in November and took up formally my role in February this year. And it's been an opportunity for me to work alongside Minister Twyford, but with a very clear vision in mind that we can do things differently. And if we take the learnings and insights, the learned experiences and insights of what we have done in the Māori development space in housing, it seemed to me a good place to start. We weren't starting at ground zero, we were starting with a wealth of knowledge and information about what it took to build financial capability, skills amongst the whānau, what it took to invest in whānau thinking about better utilisation of their whenua in order to grow their aspiration, and what papakainga aspirations might sit alongside that, but more importantly, what was the sustainable vision of the whānau in terms of their whānau and community development, and from an economic, social advancement, cultural wealth point of view, what did that picture look like? So we're not starting from ground zero in the Māori space in my mind. And I brought that perspective certainly into this role that I have as the Associate Minister for Māori Housing. With that in mind, I think I'm entering this conversation that you're having today in a way that seeks to enable and empower Māori aspiration. And I have a very clear sense that the role of the government has three characteristics. Some of this I spoke to at the Housing Summit in Auckland that was referred to earlier by previous speakers. So those three characteristics in my mind for government was one to be that of activator, that of an enabler, and that of a partner. And in my mind, once government was very clear that's the nature of the role, because we can't do everything by ourselves. We do need partners. We do need to be more engaged within communities to get, I guess, a place-based approach, as has been referred to by the Here Taunga whānau. It meant going deeper into the way in which government could use its various levers to affect and catalyse change. So, and this approach isn't limited, I believe, just to housing. It could be applied in a more general sense to actually place-based community development models. Hey, but I'll come back to that. As an activator, I think our government is seeking to create the right conditions where diverse aspirations and worldviews can play an integral role in shaping the wellbeing through housing. For Māori housing aspiration, this means ensuring that we're able to be more responsive. How many people in this room were brought up in a state home or in a home where their parents capitalised on the family benefit? How many people have their whānau keep your hands up, how many people still have their whānau living in those homes? Okay. Interesting. In my community, in my little community that I was brought up in, the 34 homes around the street of the marae that I live on, those homes were bought with funds capitalised through the family benefit. They've got the third generation of whānau living in the same homes. Pretty worse for wear, some of them. Over the time, some of them have been sold within the whānau and the like. But the point of it is, by and large, in many Māori communities, and you will find them wherever you go, there is a core base of homes that are like this. Just this week, I visited two couples who, through our repairs and maintenance program, we were able to help them upgrade their home. One whānau had lived in their home for 64 years. His mother bought the house. The man that the kaumātua that currently owns the house, had 7 siblings. They were all brought up in the house. He had 7 children. They were all brought up in the house. And here's the thing. They could never afford to do up the house. So with our humble investment of supporting their repair and maintenance program, they are now able to have a conversation of, because they own the home freehold, they just didn't have the money to maintain it. They are now able to have the conversation about, okay, we got that old, that section that you could have where you can probably fit 3 townhouses, if not 4, with the right design. They are now able to have the conversation on that same bit of land about what the potential is to build a modular type of housing environment so that the mokopuna, the children and the mokopuna, can have secure accommodation. So don't think that I think when we have the conversation about capitalising the family benefit and bringing that back as an initiative, I think that's a valid point, but we shouldn't overlook the opportunity to understand our community and those who still live in those same houses and what the potential of their footprint could provide them to ensure secure accommodation. Because in that house that I visited, in West Auckland, where their children, because they've got lots of children and it was only a 2-bedroom home, were renting somewhat down the street, they're paying through the nose to do that. With a bit of education and advice and support, I think this is the type of other opportunity we could provide through a Māori housing lens, and I'm committed to that kind of an approach. So my point there is that as an activator, the government's role can be to set the right conditions, and many of you have raised the issues, the right policy context, the ability to get over those key impediments. For Māori, it's the types of housing situation that I've just explained, removing the impediments on Māori land, improving the decision-making, planning and consenting processes with local government, and in many cases, improving the current limitations of what exists for iwi who have RFR opportunities but can't realise the full potential of it in a housing space unless another conversation existed. So without a doubt, we do need to have a whole of government approach to housing, and that is the big question, is how big and how committed can we be in this space to do something really different to get the shift that you're all wanting to happen. Well, I can say in the Māori space, a lot of the leadership in this area are coming from Māori who are wanting to open up the windows in this space and urging the government to move forward with them. So we're looking for partners. We said this at the Auckland Housing Summit conference. And the partners are, yes, iwi organisations, Māori organisations, community organisations, faith-based organisations who are going to pick up the challenge with us to try and do something differently. And we, as I said, we can't do it all by ourselves. When I think about the role of enabler, we need to support, in my mind, we need to support whānau and communities to take the steps required to reach their own housing aspirations, whether that's to own a home or simply just to have secure, safe and stable community solutions to their housing aspiration so they can have a safe place, safe, warm, healthy place to raise their children and live in. I'm not here to predetermine what that is, but I can say for many of the communities that I work with, home ownership is way over there. Way over there because they're in a city where they're there for work, where they prefer to live is pretty far away from where their reality is. So I'm mindful we've got to appreciate, certainly from a government perspective, we can't predetermine that everybody has a home ownership aspiration in the place where they are, because it just might be not really their aspiration there. I want to be really kind of clear and focused in the work that we're doing in the Māori housing space, that place-based solutions actually work really well, and I'd like to commit time and effort of our Māori housing unit to that. And why that works, in my mind, and I'm thinking outside of Auckland, but potentially could work for Auckland. Why that could work is because placemaking is about building community. It's about inclusion and cohesion. It's about using housing as a pillar and a platform to be able to create this bigger ecosystem of opportunity, a training pipeline, a training and employment pipeline, the opportunity, and I'll be quite excited to hear the progress with the tai whenua around cooperative housing and opening up that window for Māori communities and communities in general. But it does lend itself to an opportunity to strengthen the very best of the fabric that sits and makes up the heartbeat of every region, actually, are strong communities. And it also strengthens whānau aspiration as well. So I'm quite a champion of that approach. But in order for that approach to work, there's something community can do that government will never be able to do. And that's understand who your community is, what their aspirations are. These are people you know so well. For much of and I don't think I'm being inflammatory, but for much of the part across the government sector, those data sets are pulled together as data sets. That's not the solution we need. We need solutions that drill down to communities in a way that we're understanding these people, their lifetime kind of journey and aspiration, and how we might help them to navigate that and support it, with housing as a key investment pillar. So that's, as an enabler, I think partnering into communities, partnering with whānau, partnering into this space is an approach that I'd like to definitely support. The other more direct aspect, and actually the speaker from the IMSP, sorry I forgot your name, but when you spoke, I thought, oh right, this is where the partnership coordinator was likely to go, and we raised this again at the Auckland Housing Summit. But if the government as treaty partner is to be taken to the next step, which I think there is every opportunity to consider what that starts to look like, then we have to ask the question on both sides of the partnership table, if you like, how does that benefit New Zealand as a whole? And I think we can tell that story. I don't think it's a hard thing, but we should be very clear about how that treaty partnership benefits New Zealanders as a whole. You see, I do believe that housing is a human right, but I do believe that when we give effect to the treaty partnership in the housing space, it's Article 3, and addressing the inequity in housing that we start to get cut through in all sorts of communities across New Zealand where deprivation has inhibited so much. We can take a treaty lens on that argument, we can apply it, and then we can say this, that by taking the treaty lens and applying this in a way that seeks to cut through inequity, there is a multiple advantage for many communities. So go into your own community and say, who will this benefit? Sure, this will benefit Māori and Pacific, who we all talk about as not having the access to finance to be able to own homes, yes, but it will also help young people. It will also help vulnerable people, our immigrant communities. It will also help many of our disabled communities. So I think that's the way in which we can apply a treaty-based argument and the human rights conversation that's been entertained in this space that can get the type of cut-through that our country so desperately needs. So, for the government to play its role as treaty partner, I think we have to bring the benefits of that together in a way that has a mutually beneficial outcome to treaty partners, yes, in all communities. I also believe that the opportunity to enact partnerships that are a lot more diverse and probably not the norm, to become the norm. And by this I mean that it's not just about a better landscape for the public sector to work together, it's actually a better landscape for the community and NGO sector, faith-based organisations to work in collaboration with government agencies as well as iwi and Māori organisations. I'm mindful that there are researchers in the room who are able to point to evidence-based findings, learned experience about what the long-standing deficiencies in the policy space has looked like, as well as some of the successes. And I certainly am one to say that we should build on that and platform from that as a way to improve the settings that can inform this government. When I think about some of the work that we've achieved already, and I'm kind of not sure whether this was covered last night by Minister Twyford, and if it sounds repetitive, then I'll forgive you if there's a few yawns in the audience. But we've been working really hard to bring together a broken system. So we've just introduced, as you know, the Kāinga Ora Homes and Communities Bill to Parliament to set up our Urban Development Authority and bring together parts of the system all into one umbrella. And that's really important. I want to, by way of an aside, just say that the naming of the entity, Kāinga Ora Homes and Communities, was quite deliberate. Underpinning the name was not only about a structural shift and an intent to ensure that there was more cohesion in the housing space, but was actually going to bring back a focus on placemaking, on community, on ensuring that we had secure and sustainable outcomes for whānau, and again, building greater social cohesion. So Kāinga Ora isn't just about home. There are many, I'm sure the discourse in this room would have said, it's not just about home. It's about the people, it's about the community, it's about the sustainability of that housing vision for intergenerational households. That's why I think it fits the way and the approach that this government is taking. So when I think about some of the opportunities that we've had to, again, take the learnings from what we've seen in the Māori development space and start to frame up what the Māori housing unit can look like. We have Te Kahui Kāinga, which is the Māori housing unit. We're currently working on developing our work program and our work frame. We have a more of an engagement approach with stakeholders, so that we're testing out rather than proposing from the outset about how the housing unit can make an impact. And again, this is a different way of doing things, because probably in the old days, I'd have a few key priorities and I'd just say, this is what we're going to do. But actually, because of the nature of the challenge and the type of approach that I want to take, place-based, community development, whānau development centred, we're going to be engaging a bit more in how we co-construct, co-create the work program. Why this matters is because I said at the outset, we can't do everything by ourselves. We're going to have to find a way to work with others. So that's going to set, I think, a good footprint for us to be able to do that. I want to acknowledge the shifts that have already been made within the Māori space of housing. I want to acknowledge the Māori Housing Network of Te Puni Kōkiri. I want to also acknowledge Te Matapihi, who have been keen partners, and all of those groups that have engaged with us in a small but substantial way. Habitat for Humanity, developers who have worked with us. Because what we have learnt through the different collaborations and the insights of different things across the country, small but critical, is that with the right partnerships and the right communities for the people, with the whānau in mind, we can actually do some really innovative things. So I want to keep an element of innovation in the Māori housing spectrum space because we thrive better in an innovative environment. If you tell us here's the ceiling, then everybody's going to say, nah, that's not going to work. But if you just say, okay, we're here to start to think about what is the best solution in this community around housing, and here's the spectrum of housing initiatives that we can draw on from a government side. What is the community bringing to the table, or iwi? I think that's going to be a more fertile ground to come up with the right approach for the right community and solutions that work long term. I know that there's a few challenges in the community housing space, and I simply wanted to indicate that we, for the most part, through Kahui Kāinga, wanting to support more Māori getting into community housing providers. But we do recognise that there's got to be a lot of collaboration in this space because of the existing providers that are there, 9 kaupapa Māori community housing providers providing around about 350 affordable rental houses for whānau and around about 150 whānau from Social Housing Register. There's heaps of learnings to date about how we might improve the system. Here's the thing, kaupapa Māori community housing providers make up about 20% of the total number of registered CHIPs, but they deliver only 2% of the IRRS places. Now something's not happening or needs to happen better in order for many of our CHIPs to do better and actually respond to the need. So what we've got are officials working in this space, encouraging discussions or facilitating discussions to get our Māori CHIP providers together and figure out what we need to do better. It could well be that the outcome of those discussions could lead to a better approach. Who knows? I don't want to predetermine that. And it could also be a greater collaboration across all Māori CHIPs to enhance the level of impact that you can have within your communities and across the country nationally. All I'm sending a signal about is that I do encourage our CHIPs to get together and figure out how we can overcome the existing barriers that are there. Now, we all know that not all Māori housing issues are solely responded to by Māori housing providers. In fact, many of our faith-based services step into this space as well as our NGO sector who have commitments in very high needs areas. And I want to, at this juncture, recognise Housing First and the work that they're doing in areas and working through how that could better work for Māori. And I understand that of the Housing First collective collaborations that are currently in place, the one in Aotearoa and also in Auckland, people are finding out, again, how to be more responsive from a kaupapa Māori point of view. I'm looking forward to the feedback in that space, and I certainly want to make sure that we, in the same way with the CHIPS, can improve the way in which that works. And I need to hear very quickly from providers if there is further thinking about how this could be done. So lastly, the thing that I kind of wanted to end on is what is the problem we're here to try and fix? For government, we've got a broken system and the expectations are high, but we can't fix everything in our first term, but we're certainly committed to building enough of the pipeline across the spectrum of housing responses so that people can see where we're wanting to ensure that at the most vulnerable ends of the spectrum, we're absolutely responding. And at the aspirational end, we are looking to remove the impediments and try and improve the outcomes. It's not going to be a smooth path, and you've already seen how rough it's been for my colleague Minister Twyford. But the point is, we're committed to housing, not because it's a nice thing to do, but because we believe it is a key investment pillar to the long-term well-being of our whānau in our communities. And if we maintain that focus in partnership and collaboration with all like minds like yourselves, then over the next 10 years of key investment, then I think we will start to see those trends in the most difficult areas really start to change. Okay, so, everybody's going to say, oh, well, we want more action. I hope this is a signal that we're taking action where it's needed most in this term. In this first term. Again, we can't achieve everything in the first term. But the other thing is the signals that we're sending into our communities and across the country is that we need to move further and farther and deeper into this space. And we hope that you can stay the course with us. We're going to need that. One last thing, innovation. If all of this was just delivering a policy, how easy it would be. But actually, what we know is that some of the most innovative solutions to the biggest challenges have provided us some exciting opportunities. And I think that's the space that you're in. When I go out and visit, and I think about communities who, actually I'm visiting with communities who are saying, well, we're just trying this out, never been done before, but we're doing it this way because it meets the values of what we're about as an organisation, and we've got some partners and we just need government to do that. I've seen so much of that around the country, and I think that New Zealand is small enough to foster innovation in ways, in the housing space, in ways that meet the needs of the community and is place-based and can build back and invest in the community development. Here's the thing, just yesterday, I visited with an energy provider. Very interesting. They've created an opportunity for a very bespoke group of the highest deprivation areas of their region to be able to have a gift-back system for their power system. So you buy power at a set rate, whatever savings you have within the system, you can gift on your savings to your neighbour, your grandmother, your cousin, or whatever that's in the system. So they're trialling this opportunity as a way of addressing the equity issues, energy poverty actually. And so we had the conversation. I'm quite excited about it, as they are. And I said, so you mean to say, if I married you up with a community housing provider and knowledge of those families and those communities, they could come into the system and you could help them cut their power bill by at least 2/3? And they said, yes, that's the intent. So we're starting with housing as a key investment pillar, but other parts of the system of infrastructure that sit around housing are starting to think about the shift required as well. Because when our most vulnerable and communities are doing well, we're all doing well. We're all doing well. And for that to happen, that's got to require a lot of collaborations and joined up effort. That's the kind of picture I want to build and be a part of building. And I know many of you are in that space too. So I'm really pleased to be here and offer some thoughts at your Shift conference. I'm just a small cog in a part of the wheel that turns other cogs. But if you get a sense of where I'm going in the Māori housing space, I hope one thing comes through loud and clear. We are whānau-centred. It's about community development, placemaking, and it's about ensuring that innovation to the bigger aspiration of whānau development with housing as a key investment pillar becomes the norm. Nō reira, kia koutou katoa, tēnā tātou.